As part of our ongoing series exploring the miracles of Jesus as recounted in the Gospels, we've already delved into several awe-inspiring moments that illuminate his ministry. Our journey began in Cana, where Jesus transformed water into wine at a wedding feast, a powerful demonstration of his divine authority and his profound compassion for the joys and concerns of everyday life. Then, we witnessed the miraculous healing of the royal official's son, a testament to the unwavering power of faith. Jesus' word alone restored the child to health, even from a distance, showcasing the boundless reach of his healing touch. We then found ourselves marveling at the first miraculous catch of fish, a scene of abundance where Jesus provided for his followers beyond their wildest expectations. Nets overflowed, revealing his capacity to provide both physical and spiritual sustenance. In Capernaum, we were confronted with the raw power of Jesus' authority over darkness as he healed a man possessed by an unclean spirit. The demon's expulsion revealed Jesus' unwavering stance against evil and his commitment to liberating those held captive by it. He also extended his compassion to Peter's mother-in-law, restoring her to health and enabling her to return to her duties, a quiet act of service that spoke volumes about his attention to the needs of individuals. Jesus' boundless compassion continued to manifest as he fearlessly healed a man afflicted with leprosy, defying the rigid social barriers of the time and demonstrating that no one is beyond the reach of God's unwavering love. We also witnessed faith in action when he healed a paralytic man who was lowered through the roof of a crowded house, emphasizing the profound impact of persistent belief and the lengths to which people will go to seek healing. His mercy extended to the synagogue, where he healed a man with a withered hand, challenging both physical and spiritual limitations and asserting his authority over the Sabbath itself. Finally, we observed Jesus' profound authority and compassion in the healing of the centurion's servant, a story that highlights the unexpected sources of humility and faith, even in the heart of a Roman soldier. In this video, we continue our exploration of Jesus' miraculous works, seeking to uncover not just the wonders themselves, but the deeper lessons of faith, compassion, and divine authority that they reveal. We invite you to join us as we delve even deeper into these incredible stories of Jesus' power and love, seeking to glean wisdom and inspiration from these timeless accounts. And, as always, we encourage you to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a moment of this inspiring series. The small town of Nain was draped in a heavy silence, a quiet town usually bustling with daily life now heavy with sorrow. A funeral procession wound slowly through the narrow streets, a somber river flowing through the heart of the community. At its center was the lifeless body of a young man, the only son of a grieving widow. Her cries echoed off the stone buildings, a lament that resonated with every soul who heard it. Mothers and fathers understood the profound despair of loss, the ache that gnawed at the soul. But for this woman, the loss was absolute, a crushing weight that threatened to overwhelm her. There were no comforting words that could penetrate the wall of grief, no remedies left to try, only the heavy weight of sorrow pressing down on every shoulder in the procession. As fate would have it, Jesus and his disciples happened upon the scene, drawn perhaps by the sheer density of sorrow in the air. The crowd, their faces etched with grief, noticed him immediately, their whispers rippling through the assembled throng like a breeze through tall grass. Curiosity mixed with a flicker of hope. Seeing the widow, her face a mask of despair, his heart was moved with profound compassion. Without hesitation, he approached the procession, his presence a beacon of light in the sea of darkness. "Do not weep," he said softly, his voice cutting through the silence and addressing her pain directly. Then, in an act that startled everyone present, he reached out and touched the coffin. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Custom dictated a respectful distance from death, a recognition of its power and finality. But Jesus stepped closer, unafraid, undeterred. With unwavering authority, he commanded, "Young man, I say to you, get up." The crowd held its breath, every eye fixed on the still form within the coffin. A moment of unbearable tension stretched into an eternity. And then, impossibly, the dead man sat up, his eyes blinking in the light, and began to speak. Life had returned where there had only been silence, a victory snatched from the jaws of death itself. The young man, now restored to life, whole and breathing, was handed back to his mother, a reunion that brought tears of joy to the eyes of all who witnessed it. The people were overwhelmed, their hearts overflowing with a mixture of awe and disbelief. A wave of wonder swept through the crowd, mingling with a healthy dose of fear. They proclaimed, "A great prophet has appeared among us," and whispers spread like wildfire. God has visited his people. This miracle marked a significant turning point in Jesus' ministry. It revealed that his authority was not limited to healing sickness or overcoming weakness, nor was it constrained by distance. He had power over death itself, the ultimate human fear. Word of this extraordinary event spread quickly, drawing even more people to him, their hopes ignited by the possibility of encountering such power and compassion. The stage was now set for even greater challenges, for his path would lead him through trials of faith. Crowds would grow larger, skepticism would harden into resistance, and his authority would increasingly confront both physical and spiritual boundaries, testing the limits of what was possible. Next, Jesus would calm a raging storm, a demonstration of his power that extended not only over human suffering but over the very forces of nature. The disciples had witnessed many miracles, but nothing could have prepared them for the raw, untamed fury of nature unleashed. After a long day of teaching and healing along the shores of Galilee, their bodies weary but their spirits lifted, Jesus suggested they cross to the other side of the lake, seeking a moment of rest and respite. The boat cut through calm waters at first, the sun beginning its descent, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple. But as they ventured further from the shore, the wind began to rise, a low growl at first, then a full-throated roar. Suddenly, waves slammed against the sides of the boat, drenching the disciples and threatening to capsize the small vessel. Panic set in, its icy grip tightening around their hearts. These were men who knew the lake intimately, men who had wrestled with storms before and considered themselves able seamen. Yet this one felt different, unstoppable, a force of nature intent on their destruction. Jesus, however, lay asleep in the stern, seemingly untouched by the chaos, his face serene amidst the turmoil. Fear turned to desperation, and the disciples, their voices laced with panic, shook him awake. "Lord, save us, we're going to drown." His reply was calm, almost questioning, a stark contrast to their terror. "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" Then he rose to his feet, his presence commanding, and spoke to the wind and the waves. In an instant, the storm vanished as if it never existed. The lake's surface became smooth as glass, the danger gone, leaving only the gentle lapping of water against the hull. The disciples were left in stunned silence, their mouths agape in awe and disbelief, or replaced fear, washing over them like the calm after the storm. Everything they had known about authority, power, and the natural world shifted in that moment. The one who had healed the sick, restored life, and commanded demons could command the very elements themselves. Even as they tried to comprehend the magnitude of what they had just witnessed, far off along the shore, desperate cries for help would soon reach his ears. A man possessed and tormented, bound not by water or wind, but by something far darker, awaited him. Jesus and his disciples arrived on the eastern shore of the Sea of Galilee, entering the region of the Gerasenes, a place steeped in mystery and shrouded in a reputation of chaos. The area was known for its desolate tombs, its craggy hills, and the people who lived on the margins of society, those cast aside and forgotten. It was here, in this desolate landscape, that they encountered a man unlike any they had seen before. He was tormented by an unclean spirit, a force that held him captive and drove him to madness, living among the tombs, a haunting figure in a landscape of death. No one could bind him, not with chains, not with shackles. He broke them all with superhuman strength, driven by an inner turmoil that defied all attempts at restraint. He screamed day and night, his cries echoing through the hills, cutting himself with stones, driven by a force that had stolen his mind and dignity, leaving him a shell of his former self. Villagers kept their distance, fearful and hopeless, whispering about the cursed man who roamed the hills, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked in their midst. When the man saw Jesus from afar, he ran towards him, his movements erratic and unpredictable, and fell before him, crying out with a voice both terrified and desperate, a voice that seemed to come from the depths of his soul. "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torment me." Jesus, unflinching in the face of such raw torment, commanded the spirit to speak, asking the man's name. The answer came with chilling horror, a voice that seemed to echo from the depths of the underworld. "My name is Legion, for we are many." The disciples watched in disbelief, their hearts pounding in their chests, as Jesus confronted the darkness, not with fear, but with unwavering authority. He commanded the spirits to come out of the man, his voice resonating with power. The unclean spirits, sensing their impending doom, begged and pleaded to be sent into a herd of pigs grazing nearby, their desperation palpable. Jesus permitted it, and in a sudden, chaotic rush, the demons left the man and entered the animals, which then ran headlong down the steep hillside and plunged into the lake, a swirling mass of chaos and destruction. The man collapsed, free at last, his body limp but his spirit liberated. His mind, once a battlefield, was now calm. The storm within finally subsided. His strength, once twisted into destruction, was now restored to its rightful purpose. Villagers, seeing the transformation with their own eyes, were amazed and frightened, their understanding of the world challenged by the impossible. Realizing that even forces beyond human control obeyed him, the man, no longer bound by chains or fear, begged to follow Jesus, to stay by his side and learn from the one who had set him free. But Jesus, knowing the power of testimony, sent him home with a new purpose, to proclaim what had happened and to share the transformative power of God's mercy with those who knew him. Even in that remote place, far from the bustling towns and teeming crowds, the story of Jesus' authority spread, carried on the winds and whispered from ear to ear. Word would continue to reach villages and cities, carrying whispers of a man who could heal bodies, silence storms, and confront forces that no one else dared face. A beacon of hope in a world shrouded in darkness. Among the crowds that followed Jesus, a sea of faces seeking healing and hope, there was a woman who had suffered in silence for 12 long years, her life a constant battle against a debilitating illness. She had spent all she had on doctors, seeking relief that never came, her hopes dwindling with each failed attempt. Her body was weak, her spirit weary, and her condition made her an outcast, untouchable under the law, hidden from friends and family, relegated to the shadows of society. Yet, a flicker of hope still burned within her, a stubborn ember refusing to be extinguished. She had heard stories of Jesus, of his extraordinary authority, of the way he effortlessly healed the sick with a touch or a word. If she could just touch his clothes, she believed with unwavering conviction that she might be made whole, that her suffering could finally come to an end. The crowd pressed around him, thick and jostling, a human river flowing in all directions. But she moved with unwavering determination, slipping through unnoticed, her desperation and faith fueling her every step. When her hand brushed the edge of his cloak, the rough fabric grazing her fingertips, something extraordinary happened. An energy surged through her, a warmth that spread from her hand throughout her entire body. Jesus stopped immediately, sensing the flow of power leaving him. "Who touched me?" he asked, turning to the crowd, his voice carrying a note of surprise. Though everyone had been rubbing against him in the throng, he knew that this touch was different, a touch of faith, a touch of desperation. The woman, trembling, her heart pounding in her chest, fell at his feet and confessed everything, pouring out her story of suffering and hope. "Daughter," Jesus said, his voice filled with compassion, "your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." Instantly, a wave of relief coursed through her body, washing away the years of pain and exhaustion. 12 years of suffering vanished, replaced by a lightness and vitality she had long forgotten. She stood whole, restored, and alive, a testament to the power of faith. The crowd could see the transformation in her face, in her posture, but only she understood the profound depth of what had just occurred, the miracle that had unfolded within her. This miracle revealed the quiet power of faith, the kind that moves through crowds, crosses barriers, and touches the very source of life itself. It was not dramatic, not explosive, but a subtle, profound shift that resonated deep within her soul. Yet, it changed everything for one woman who had given up hope, proving that even the smallest spark of belief can ignite a flame of healing. Even as she walked away, fully restored and radiating joy, others would bring more needs to Jesus, their hearts burdened by sorrow and desperation. A girl lying at death's door, a desperate father pleading for his child's life, showing that faith, courage, and unwavering trust would continue to lead people into his presence, seeking solace and healing. Jairus, a synagogue leader, a man of influence and respect, knelt at Jesus' feet, his face pale with fear and hope intertwined, a complex tapestry of emotions etched on his brow. His daughter, his beloved child, lay at the point of death, her life hanging by a thread, and no medicine, no ritual, no plea from family had worked. In desperation, he came to the man people whispered about, the teacher whose words calmed storms, and whose touch healed the sick, placing his last hope in the hands of this miracle worker. As they made their way to Jairus' house, their progress slow and arduous, a crowd pressed in around Jesus, eager to catch a glimpse of him, to touch him, to be near the source of his power. The path was narrow, filled with noise and commotion, a chaotic journey fueled by hope and desperation. Yet, Jairus' hope did not waver, his gaze fixed on Jesus, his faith a beacon in the gathering storm. Midway through their journey, a woman, who had been suffering for 12 years from a debilitating bleeding disorder, touched his cloak and was instantly healed, a testament to the unexpected ways in which faith can intersect and miracles can unfold. This unexpected interruption only heightened the tension and urgency of their quest. By the time Jesus arrived at Jairus' house, word had already come, a devastating blow that threatened to crush all remaining hope. "Your daughter is dead," a messenger announced, his voice heavy with sorrow. Do not trouble the teacher anymore. Fear threatened to consume Jairus, to extinguish the last flicker of hope in his heart. But Jesus, sensing his despair, looked at him with unwavering compassion and said with quiet authority, his voice cutting through the noise and confusion, "Do not be afraid, only believe." Inside the house, mourners filled the room, their wails of grief filling the air, creating a cacophony of sorrow. Family and friends huddled together, their faces stained with tears, their hearts broken by the loss of the young girl. Jesus, undeterred by the atmosphere of despair, took her by the hand, his touch gentle but firm, and said, "Talitha, come," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." And then, a miracle unfolded before their very eyes. The child rose immediately, her eyes fluttering open, her chest rising and falling with breath, restored to life, defying the very finality of death. Parents wept, their faces radiant with joy, awe and wonder mingling as they embraced her, their tears a testament to the profound power of love and faith. The crowd was speechless, their faces a mixture of amazement, fear, and wonder at what they had witnessed, a moment that defied all logic and reason. This miracle revealed that Jesus' power was not limited by time, distance, or the finality of death. Faith, unwavering trust, and his divine authority could undo what seemed irreversible, turning sorrow into joy and death into life. Lives, families, and communities were being transformed one encounter at a time, each miracle a ripple that spread outwards, touching countless lives. As whispers of his extraordinary authority spread beyond Galilee, carried on the winds and whispered from ear to ear, more people from towns near and far would be drawn to him, seeking healing, hope, and a glimpse of the divine. Those who were sick, blind, demon-possessed, and even those living with a despair that no one could heal, all drawn by the promise of a brighter future. As Jesus walked through the towns of Galilee, his presence a beacon of light in a world shrouded in darkness, 2 men blind from birth had heard of him, their ears attuned to the whispers of hope that followed him. Stories of his healings, his extraordinary authority, and his boundless compassion had spread faster than the crowds themselves, igniting a flame of hope in their hearts. Desperation drove them forward, their feet guided by faith, each step propelled by the belief that their lives could be transformed. They began calling out, their voices breaking through the noise of the marketplace, their cries echoing through the streets. "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on us." The crowd hesitated, murmuring in surprise, unsure of how to react to their bold plea. But the blind men refused to be ignored, their voices growing louder, their determination unwavering, pressing closer to the man they believed could restore their sight. Jesus stopped, his steps faltering amidst the throngs of people. He turned to them, his gaze steady and calm, his eyes filled with compassion. "Do you believe I am able to do this?" he asked, his voice gentle but probing. "Yes, Lord," they cried in unison, their voices filled with conviction. He touched their eyes, his touch gentle and purposeful, and spoke softly but with undeniable power. "According to your faith, let it be done to you." In an instant, darkness vanished, replaced by a flood of light. Shapes, colors, and faces emerged where only shadows had existed for years, a new world unfolding before their very eyes. The men blinked, astonished, drinking in a world they had only imagined, a world of vibrant beauty and endless possibilities. Their steps faltered as they adjusted to sight, their bodies unsteady as they navigated a world they had only known through touch and sound. But joy and awe flooded their hearts, overwhelming them with a sense of gratitude and wonder. Jesus instructed them not to tell anyone, knowing the potential for unwanted attention and distractions. But their astonishment was too great, their joy too overwhelming to contain. They left immediately, walking through the streets of the town, their vision restored, and with it a profound recognition of who he was, their hearts overflowing with gratitude. As they went, their stories spread like wildfire, igniting hope in the hearts of others. Others were still being brought forward, some with sickness, some with ailments that could not be explained, and some bound by forces beyond human understanding, all seeking a touch, a word, a miracle. Among them was a man unable to speak, trapped in silence, whose desperation would soon meet Jesus' healing touch. Among the crowds that pressed around Jesus, a multitude of suffering souls seeking solace and healing, was a man who had never spoken a word, his silence a heavy burden that weighed upon him since he had been possessed by an unclean spirit. Wherever he went, silence followed, a constant reminder of his affliction, and misunderstanding shadowed his every step. Families whispered about his condition, their faces etched with pity and fear. Neighbors avoided him, unsure of how to interact with someone so different. Despair had long settled in his heart, a constant companion that whispered doubts and hopelessness. When he was brought to Jesus, the crowd held its breath, sensing the weight of his affliction, the depth of his silence. This was not a simple sickness or a visible injury, something easily diagnosed and treated. This was a life silenced, a mind trapped, a spirit oppressed by forces that no one else could command, a challenge that seemed insurmountable. Jesus approached him, his presence radiating compassion and understanding. The atmosphere seemed to shift, the air growing thick with anticipation. Authority radiated from him, not in force, but in certainty, a quiet confidence that inspired hope. The man looked at him, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope, his heart yearning for a release from his silent prison. With a calm, commanding voice, Jesus said, "Be healed." Immediately, the oppressive spirit fled, its grip on the man broken, and the man spoke clearly for the first time, his voice finding its way into the world after years of silence. Words flowed from his lips like a rushing stream, a torrent of thoughts and emotions that had been bottled up for far too long. Astonishment rippled through the crowd, their faces etched with disbelief and wonder. Those who had doubted, who had whispered, who had feared, now watched in awe as life and voice were restored, as the man embraced his newfound freedom. The people marveled at the miracle they had witnessed, their hearts filled with gratitude and wonder. But not everyone rejoiced. Some scribes whispered among themselves, their faces darkened with suspicion, accusing Jesus of working with dark powers, their hearts hardened by disbelief. Yet the miracle was undeniable, a tangible demonstration of divine power that defied their attempts to explain it away. Healing, liberation, restoration, all in one moment, a testament to the transformative power of Jesus' touch. Even as the man began to speak and rejoice, sharing his story with anyone who would listen, the crowds continued to swell, bringing the sick, the blind, and the suffering, their hopes ignited by the possibility of encountering such extraordinary power. The crowds had followed Jesus for days, their numbers growing with each passing hour, traveling across rolling hills and along dusty paths. Their feet sore but their spirits lifted. They came hungry, not just for bread to fill their empty stomachs, but for hope, for healing, for the words that could touch their hearts and transform their lives. By the time they reached the remote hillside near Bethsaida, the sun hung high in the sky, beating down on them with relentless intensity, and their stomachs ached from the long journey, their bodies weary from the lack of food and rest. There was no food to be found, no preparation for a feast, only the vast hillside stretching before them, and thousands of people waiting expectantly, their eyes fixed on Jesus. Jesus looked over the crowd, his heart moved with compassion, sensing the depth of their hunger, not just for physical sustenance, but for spiritual nourishment. He knew that their hunger ran deeper than empty stomachs, that they craved something more than just bread and water. He asked his disciples a simple question, his voice carrying across the hillside, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" The disciples, their faces etched with concern, counted what little they had and found it utterly hopeless. 5 loaves of bread, barely enough to feed a family, and 2 small fish, enough for a snack. It was nothing, a mere pittance in the face of such overwhelming need. Too small, impossible to feed thousands. But Jesus had never been constrained by what seemed impossible, his faith transcending the limitations of human reason. He took the loaves and fish, held them up to the heavens, gave thanks to God for his provision, and began to distribute them. His disciples followed his lead, their faces a mixture of doubt and obedience, handing pieces of bread and fish to the crowd as he instructed, their movements hesitant at first, then growing bolder as they witnessed the miracle unfolding before their eyes. Slowly, miraculously, the small supply began to grow, multiplying in his hands, feeding the multitude beyond all expectations. More than enough to feed everyone, their hunger completely satisfied. The hillside echoed with the sounds of eating and laughter, a symphony of gratitude and joy. Adults and children alike were satisfied, their stomachs full and their spirits lifted. Not a scrap was wasted. 12 baskets of leftovers remained, a testament to the abundance of God's provision. The people were stunned, their faces radiating awe and disbelief. They had come expecting a teacher, a healer, maybe a few words of comfort to soothe their weary souls. Instead, they had witnessed something extraordinary, something that defied all explanation. Bread multiplied before their eyes, a tangible sign that abundance and provision were not limited to what humans could see or calculate. A powerful reminder that God's resources are limitless. This miracle was more than just feeding bodies. It revealed Jesus' profound care for every need, both physical and spiritual, his compassion extending to every aspect of their lives. The crowd saw that he could take the ordinary and make it extraordinary, the insufficient and turn it into plenty, transforming scarcity into abundance. And as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the hillside, they followed him, their hearts filled with curiosity, wondering what other surprises this man of compassion and power might have in store, their faith ignited by the miracles they had witnessed. Amid the hills, as the people rested with their baskets emptied and their hearts full, whispers of a storm calmed, a paralytic healed, and thousands fed by one man's hands began to spread beyond Galilee, carried on the wind and whispered from ear to ear, transforming lives and communities with their message of hope and healing. After feeding the multitude on the hillside, a task that seemed impossible yet was accomplished with ease. Jesus instructed his disciples to get into a boat and cross the Sea of Galilee, seeking a moment of rest and solitude. While they set sail, he went up the mountain to pray alone, seeking communion with his Father. Darkness settled over the lake, a heavy blanket that obscured the horizon, and the wind began to pick up, its force growing with each passing moment. Waves crashed against the boat, rocking it violently, threatening to capsize the small vessel and plunge the disciples into the depths. The disciples, experienced fishermen who had spent their lives on these waters, their bodies intimately familiar with the rhythms of the lake, struggled against the storm, their muscles straining and their hearts racing with fear. They battled the waves, their faces etched with determination and desperation. But the storm seemed determined to overwhelm them. In the middle of the night, their eyes, weary and strained, caught sight of a figure moving across the water, a dark silhouette against the turbulent waves. At first, they thought it was a ghost, a phantom risen from the depths of the lake to torment them. Panic spread through the boat like wildfire, gripping their hearts with icy terror. Cries of terror echoed against the wind, their voices barely audible above the roar of the storm. "It's a ghost! It's a ghost!" But Jesus spoke immediately, his voice calm and commanding, cutting through the chaos and fear, offering reassurance and hope. "Take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid." Peter, always bold and impulsive, shouted back, his voice laced with skepticism and a glimmer of hope. "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," Jesus replied, his voice carrying across the waves, an invitation to step out of the boat and into the impossible. Peter, emboldened by his faith, stepped out of the boat, his feet leaving the familiar security of the wooden deck. For a moment, the impossible became possible, the laws of nature defied. He walked across the stormy sea toward Jesus, his steps sustained by unwavering faith. But as he walked, fear and doubt crept into his heart, undermining his confidence. He noticed the waves, the wind, the sheer impossibility of what he was doing, and began to sink, his faith faltering beneath the weight of his fear. "Lord, save me!" he cried, his voice filled with desperation, his body sinking beneath the waves. Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him, his grip firm and reassuring. "You of little faith," he said gently, his eyes filled with compassion. "Why did you doubt?" Together, they climbed back into the boat, and as they did, the wind died down, the storm subsiding as if by magic, leaving behind a serene calm that defied the chaos that had just raged. The disciples were filled with awe, their minds reeling from the extraordinary events they had witnessed. They had seen a man not only heal the sick and feed thousands, but defy the natural laws of the world itself, walking on water and commanding the elements. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving behind calm waters and a new understanding of the power and authority of Jesus. The one who controlled wind and waves could be trusted in every trial, his presence a source of strength and hope amidst the storms of life. And as the boat reached the shore, the crowds gathered again, drawn by the promise of miracles, bringing those sick, desperate, and blind to him, ready to witness power that stretched even further, beyond the waters, beyond the limits of human expectation. Jesus had left Galilee, venturing beyond the familiar boundaries of his ministry, and traveled to the region of Tyre and Sidon, a Gentile territory far from the crowds that usually thronged him, seeking a moment of respite and reflection. Here, in this foreign land, a woman approached him, her heart burdened by deep desperation and yet filled with fierce hope. Her daughter was possessed by a demon, tormented and suffering, her life consumed by darkness and despair, and nothing in her life had offered any relief. The woman, her face etched with worry and exhaustion, knelt before Jesus, her voice trembling with emotion, pleading, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on my daughter. My daughter is suffering terribly." At first, Jesus remained silent, his expression unreadable. The disciples watched, unsure of how he would respond, their curiosity piqued by the unusual encounter. Then he said something that startled her, a statement that seemed harsh and dismissive. "It is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." The woman, undeterred by his initial response, did not falter, her faith unwavering in the face of adversity. With humility and unwavering determination, she replied, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Jesus looked at her, his eyes filled with admiration, seeing not only her courage but the depth of her faith, a faith that transcended cultural barriers and social expectations. He smiled, his face radiating compassion, and said, "For saying this, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." Immediately, the woman returned home, her heart filled with hope, and found her daughter healed, the torment gone, replaced by peace and serenity. Relief and joy washed over her, erasing the years of despair. The power of faith had crossed cultural and social boundaries, proving that Jesus' authority was not limited by geography or tradition, but extended to all who sought him with a sincere heart. As the news spread, it became clear that Jesus' ministry was expanding beyond familiar towns and regions, reaching out to those who had been marginalized and forgotten. People began to bring others who were sick, suffering, or oppressed, recognizing that his touch and word could break every kind of bondage, his love transcending all barriers. Jesus traveled through the region of Decapolis, a land of 10 cities steeped in Hellenistic culture, where the crowds were smaller but no less desperate, their needs as profound as those he had encountered in Galilee. People came, their hearts burdened by sorrow and their bodies weakened by disease, carrying a man who could neither hear nor speak, his life limited by silence and isolation, his world a prison of unspoken thoughts and unheard sounds. Friends and family pleaded with Jesus, their voices filled with hope and desperation, bringing him to the center of the gathering, hoping that the stories of healing they had heard were true, that this man could break the chains of silence that bound their loved one. Jesus, ever compassionate, took the man aside, away from the pressing crowd, seeking a moment of quiet intimacy. He used his hands to touch him, his fingers gently probing his ears and his tongue, seeking to unlock the channels of communication. He looked into the man's eyes, his gaze filled with a calm authority, a certainty that inspired confidence and hope. Then, speaking with power, his voice resonating with divine energy, he whispered words that would transform the man's life, words that would unlock a world of sound and speech. Ephphatha, which means be opened. Immediately, the man's ears were opened, the sounds of the world flooding into his consciousness for the first time, and his tongue was freed, the muscles and nerves responding to his will. Words that had never sounded before now flowed naturally from his lips, forming sentences, laughter, and expressions of awe. The crowd could hardly believe their eyes, witnessing the impossible, the miraculous transformation of a man who had known only silence. Someone who had been trapped in a world of silent darkness could now hear and speak, his life irrevocably changed. The people were astonished, their faces filled with wonder and gratitude. "He has done everything well," they exclaimed, their voices rising in unison. "He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak." Families wept with joy, their hearts overflowing with gratitude, and news spread swiftly through the towns, carried on the wind and whispered from ear to ear, carrying the message of mercy and power wherever he went, a testament to the transformative power of Jesus' love. The healing did not end with one man. Word traveled quickly and others began to arrive, drawn by hope and the testimony of the healed, their faith ignited by the miracles they had witnessed. Jesus had moved on from the region of Tyre and Sidon, his ministry expanding beyond geographical boundaries, traveling along the eastern shores of the Mediterranean, his presence a beacon of light in a world often shrouded in darkness. A large crowd followed him, numbering in the thousands, drawn by the stories of healing, deliverance, and provision, their hearts yearning for something more. They had been with him for 3 days, listening to his teachings, watching his miracles, and hoping for a touch of his healing power. But now their stomachs began to grumble, and a growing concern rippled through the disciples, their faces etched with worry. Seeing the crowd, Jesus' heart was moved with compassion, his empathy extending to their physical needs as well as their spiritual hunger. They were tired, hungry, and far from any marketplace, their resources depleted and their strength waning. He recognized their need and felt compelled to act. Jesus then summoned his disciples, his gaze sweeping across their faces, and posed a question that hung heavy in the air. How could they possibly feed such an immense throng? The disciples, their brows furrowed in thought, meticulously inventoried their meager resources. 7 loaves of bread and a handful of small fish, a pitifully small offering, scarcely enough to satiate a few, let alone the thousands who now looked to them with expectant eyes. Jesus, his eyes filled with an unshakable faith, offered a prayer of thanksgiving, a silent communion with the divine source of all abundance. He then began to distribute the bread and fish, entrusting the task to his disciples. They moved among the crowd, passing out the simple fare, piece by piece, their movements a study in quiet dedication. And then, a miracle unfolded, a testament to the boundless power of God. The small supply of food multiplied exponentially, an endless stream flowing from a source unseen. Each person ate until fully satisfied, their hunger banished by this unexpected bounty. When every stomach was filled, and every plate was cleared, the disciples gathered the remnants. To their astonishment, they collected 7 overflowing baskets of leftovers, a striking symbol of God's overflowing generosity. The crowd, awestruck by this miraculous provision, murmured in amazement. Memories flickered, recalling a similar event on a distant hillside, where 5 loaves and 2 fish had miraculously fed thousands. Once again, Jesus had taken the ordinary, the commonplace, and transformed it into something truly extraordinary. The miracle stood as a tangible demonstration that Jesus' care and provision were limitless, unrestrained by scarcity or the boundaries of human expectation. As the satisfied crowd began to disperse, whispers of wonder rippled through their ranks. The healer of the sick, the restorer of the dead, the master of storms and seas. He was also a multiplier of food, a provider of abundance where once there was only want. And among the crowd, those burdened by urgent needs, the sick, the blind, the oppressed watched with renewed hope. A realization dawned. The same hands that had fed thousands with miraculous ease could also reach into their lives, offering healing and deliverance in ways they had only dared to dream. Jesus journeyed to Bethsaida, a tranquil town nestled along the lake's edge. There, the townspeople brought to him a man who had been shrouded in blindness for years, his existence a constant struggle against the darkness. His friends and family pleaded with Jesus, their voices laced with desperation, clinging to even the faintest glimmer of hope. The man's life had been a prolonged sojourn in shadows, his world defined by the limitations of darkness and uncertainty. Jesus, responding to their heartfelt pleas, led the blind man away from the bustling crowd, guiding him carefully outside the confines of the village. In the quiet solitude, he spat on the ground, mixed the saliva with earth, and gently applied the mud to the man's unseeing eyes. He then laid his hands upon him, infusing him with his healing energy, and asked, "Do you see anything?" The man blinked, his eyes fluttering open, struggling to adjust to the unfamiliar sensations. He peered around, his face etched with confusion, and responded with uncertainty. "I see people, but they look like trees walking." Jesus, recognizing the incomplete nature of the healing, gently placed his hands on the man's eyes once more, channeling his divine power. This time, the transformation was complete. The man's vision was fully restored, every detail snapping into sharp focus, every color bursting with vibrant intensity, every face rendered with perfect clarity. Jesus then sent him home with a simple, yet profound instruction. Don't even go into the village. This miracle revealed a profound truth. Healing is not always instantaneous. Transformation often unfolds in stages, a gradual process of growth and enlightenment. Clarity, understanding, and wholeness often emerge over time, a testament to the patient and unwavering nature of divine grace. The people of Bethsaida watched in awe, witnessing not only the restoration of sight, but also the patience and unwavering authority of the one who heals. Word of the miracle spread like wildfire through the town, igniting a spark of hope in the hearts of many. Even as the healed man returned to his life, others began to see the limitless possibilities of encountering Jesus, believing that those suffering from blindness, disease, or oppression might soon experience the same profound mercy and transforming power. As Jesus traversed the bustling streets of Jerusalem, his attention was drawn to a man seated by the roadside, his eyes veiled in the darkness of congenital blindness. Those who passed by cast judgmental glances, whispering amongst themselves, questioning the cause of his lifelong affliction, pondering the mysteries of fate, sin, and circumstance. Jesus, his heart stirred with compassion, approached the man, kneeling to meet his gaze, despite the man's inability to see him. He spat on the ground, mixed the saliva with the dust, and carefully applied the mud to the man's sightless eyes. Then, with a voice that resonated with authority and unwavering certainty, he spoke a simple command: "Go wash in the pool of Siloam." The man, his heart filled with a newfound hope, obeyed without hesitation. He walked with uncertain steps, his body trembling with anticipation, towards the designated pool. As he washed the mud from his eyes, a blinding light exploded into his world. Shapes, colors, and faces, previously unknown to him, now sprang into sharp focus. He could see the expansive sky above, the bustling crowds around him, and even the compassionate face of the one who had touched his eyes and set him free. Neighbors and onlookers stood in stunned silence, their faces a mixture of astonishment and disbelief. Some harbored doubts, others voiced questions, while still others erupted in joyous celebration. A man who had never known the gift of sight now moved through the world with newfound awareness, experiencing the fullness of reality in ways he had previously only imagined. This miracle was not merely a physical restoration. It was a profound spiritual symbol, a beacon of hope in the darkest of nights. It represented the light of truth piercing through the darkness of ignorance, the triumph of faith over limitations, and the breaking of chains that had bound him since birth. Even as the man's eyes adjusted to the vibrant new world around him, the impact of Jesus' power began to ripple outward, touching countless lives. Others, those trapped in the grip of sickness, deafness, or oppression, would soon discover that the same divine authority that had restored his sight could also bring them freedom in ways the world could scarcely comprehend. Jesus was teaching in a synagogue on the Sabbath, his words drawing a captivated crowd eager to hear his message of hope and salvation. Among the listeners was a woman who had been crippled for 18 long years, her body bent over, rendering her unable to straighten her back. Her life had been a seemingly endless series of limitations, marked by chronic pain, social isolation, and the crushing weight of helplessness. When Jesus saw her, his heart overflowed with compassion. He called her forward, his voice filled with unwavering certainty, and declared, "Woman, you are set free from your infirmity." He laid his hands upon her, channeling his healing energy, and immediately her back straightened, as if an invisible force had lifted the burden she had carried for so long. She stood tall for the first time in nearly 2 decades, her body restored, her strength renewed. The crowd erupted in a mixture of awe and wonder, their faces reflecting the joy of witnessing such a profound transformation. However, the religious leaders, their hearts hardened by rigid adherence to tradition, were indignant. Healing on the Sabbath, they whispered amongst themselves, was strictly forbidden. Jesus turned to them, his voice steady and unwavering, his eyes burning with righteous indignation. "You hypocrites," he declared, his words cutting through their self-righteousness. "Does not each of you untie your ox or donkey on the Sabbath and lead it to water? Should not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, be set free from her bondage on the Sabbath?" The leaders, silenced by the force of his argument, could offer no retort. The crowd, emboldened by Jesus' unwavering compassion, rejoiced at his mercy and authority. The woman, liberated in both body and spirit, became a living testament to God's power to break the chains of oppression, even when tradition sought to hold them fast. As the synagogue emptied, the whispers of this extraordinary event spread beyond its walls, carried on the tongues of those who had witnessed it firsthand. People carried news of a teacher who healed the crippled, gave sight to the blind, and freed the oppressed, drawing crowds of the sick and desperate from near and far. Among them, a man suffering from dropsy would soon stand before Jesus, his life hanging precariously on the edge of hope, unaware that the same hands that had straightened the crippled woman's back were reaching out to him, offering a chance at a new beginning. Next, on one Sabbath, Jesus accepted an invitation to the home of a prominent Pharisee, where he intended to teach and share a meal with those gathered. Among the guests was a man suffering from dropsy, his body swollen and weakened by the relentless condition. He was unable to move with ease or sit comfortably, his every breath a labored effort. The other guests murmured amongst themselves, observing Jesus with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism, waiting to see how he would respond within the confines of their carefully constructed Sabbath rules. Jesus, his eyes brimming with compassion, approached the afflicted man. Without hesitation, he turned to the assembled guests and posed a question that cut through the heart of their rigid traditions. Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? Silence descended upon the room, thick and heavy. All eyes were fixed upon Jesus, some curious, some skeptical, all acutely aware that what he was about to do would challenge their deeply ingrained understanding of the law. Then, with an aura of calm authority, Jesus reached out and touched the man, and in that instant, healing flowed through him, restoring his health, mobility, and dignity. He was able to stand and move without pain, no longer confined by the debilitating disease that had burdened him for so long. The room was stunned into silence. The Pharisees and teachers of the law, their faces etched with a mixture of awe and anger, were caught between their rigid adherence to tradition and the undeniable reality of the miracle they had just witnessed. Jesus seized the moment, transforming it into a profound lesson about mercy and the importance of human need, demonstrating that compassion must always outweigh rigid adherence to rules. Word of the healing spread rapidly through the community. People whispered about the man with dropsy who had been miraculously restored, marveling at the authority of the one who could heal with a simple touch, challenge long-held traditions, and teach profound truths in a single transformative act. The crowd gathered outside the Pharisee's home continued to swell, filled with the sick, the blind, and the oppressed, all desperate to encounter the same boundless mercy that could transform their lives. As Jesus journeyed along the border between Samaria and Galilee, he encountered 10 men afflicted with leprosy, standing at a distance, their faces disfigured by the ravages of the disease that had isolated them for years, casting them into the shadows of society. They raised their voices together, their cries echoing with desperation. Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. The crowd and the disciples watched, unsure of what would unfold, their hearts filled with a mixture of pity and apprehension. The disease had condemned these men to a life of exile, forbidding them from touching others or being touched in return. Yet here, standing before the one who had healed countless others, their hope surged, defying the despair that had long defined their existence. Jesus responded with simple, yet unwavering authority. Go, show yourselves to the priests. As they turned and walked away, their leprosy miraculously disappeared. Their skin was restored, their bodies made whole, and their spirits lifted from the crushing despair that had long defined them. One of the men, realizing the magnitude of the miracle he had received, turned back, falling at Jesus' feet in gratitude, praising God in a loud voice. Jesus, noting the man's faith, said, "Rise and go. Your faith has made you well." The healing was immediate, yet the lesson was profound. Not all who experience restoration respond with the same measure of gratitude. Some receive blessings but walk on without acknowledging the source of their deliverance. Only one returned, transformed not only in body, but also in heart. Word of the healing of the 10 lepers spread quickly, carried on the winds of hope and faith. As the grateful man continued on his way, sharing his testimony with all who would listen, others, the blind, the mute, the oppressed, continued to seek Jesus, drawn to the promise of healing and liberation. Word reached Jesus that Lazarus, the brother of Mary and Martha, was gravely ill. His sisters sent urgent messages, pleading with him to come quickly, for their brother was on the brink of death. However, Jesus delayed his arrival. By the time he reached Bethany, Lazarus had been dead for 4 days, his body already entombed. The mourners had gathered, their grief hanging heavy in the air, hope seemingly extinguished. When Jesus finally arrived in Bethany, he was met by Mary and Martha, both overwhelmed with sorrow. Martha approached him first, her voice shaking with a mixture of grief and reproach. "Lord," she said, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Jesus, his eyes filled with compassion, reassured her with words that stretched beyond the limitations of grief, offering a glimpse of eternal hope. "Your brother will rise again," he declared, his voice resonating with unwavering certainty. The crowd, aware of the profound loss, gathered at the tomb, their faces etched with sorrow and disbelief. Tears streamed down the faces of those watching as Jesus stood before the stone that sealed Lazarus's grave. He prayed aloud, giving thanks to the Father for the power that was about to be unleashed. And then, with an authority that transcended the boundaries of death itself, he cried out, "Lazarus, come out!" A moment of profound silence held everyone in suspense, the air thick with anticipation. Then, a miracle unfolded before their very eyes. Lazarus emerged from the tomb, bound in burial cloths, but alive, stepping into the sunlight once more. The mourners gasped, their faces a mixture of joy and disbelief, as they witnessed the impossible becoming reality. Life had returned where there had been only death, a testament to the boundless power of God. This miracle revealed that Jesus possessed authority not just over sickness, nature, or spiritual oppression, but over the very essence of life and death itself. The people marveled at this display of divine power, and many began to believe in him, their faith ignited by the impossible sight they had just witnessed. However, the religious leaders, their hearts hardened by pride and fear, grew even more resolute in their determination to stop the one who could even raise the dead. They plotted more urgently to silence him, fearing the growing threat he posed to their authority. Even as Lazarus walked free, the story of Jesus' power spread like wildfire, carried on the tongues of those who had witnessed the miracle firsthand. His touch, his words, his authority, the same forces that calmed storms, restored sight, and healed the broken were now known to conquer the ultimate enemy, death itself. Jesus and his disciples arrived at Jericho, where a large crowd had gathered along the road, eager to catch a glimpse of the renowned teacher. Among them was Bartimaeus, a blind beggar, sitting by the roadside, his life confined by darkness and dependence. He had heard tales of Jesus' miracles, of his healing touch, his unwavering authority, and his boundless mercy. A spark of hope flickered within his heart, igniting a desire for a better life. Bartimaeus began shouting, his voice piercing through the noise of the crowd, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." The crowd, annoyed by his persistent cries, tried to silence him, but his pleas only grew louder, fueled by the burning desire for healing. Another blind man, witnessing Bartimaeus' bold faith, joined in his cries, their voices overlapping in a desperate chorus of hope. Jesus, hearing their impassioned pleas, stopped and called them over. When they reached him, he asked, "What do you want me to do for you?" "Rabbi, let us see," they replied, their voices filled with longing and expectation. Jesus, his heart overflowing with compassion, touched their eyes and said, "Go, your faith has healed you." Immediately, their eyes opened, and light flooded in where there had been only darkness. They saw the road stretching before them, the bustling crowd, the faces of friends and strangers, and most importantly, they saw Jesus, the source of their healing. The crowd gasped in astonishment, their faces reflecting the magnitude of the miracle they had just witnessed. Men who had been blind from birth or for many years were now walking and seeing, experiencing a world transformed by a single touch and a few simple words. Bartimaeus and the other blind man, their hearts overflowing with gratitude, followed Jesus, rejoicing, their lives forever changed by the mercy and authority of God. Word spread quickly through Jericho, carried on the tongues of those who had witnessed the miraculous healing. The teacher from Galilee, who healed the blind, cast out demons, and even raised the dead, had passed through their streets once more, leaving behind a trail of hope and healing. People began to gather, seeking the same transformative power that could open blind eyes, restore shattered hope, and transform lives. Early in the morning, as Jesus and his disciples were walking from Bethany toward Jerusalem, Jesus noticed a fig tree standing by the roadside. It was full of lush green leaves, promising an abundance of ripe fruit. Yet, when he approached it, he found it bore no figs whatsoever. Jesus, his voice filled with disappointment, said to the tree, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And immediately, before the eyes of the astonished disciples, the tree withered from its roots, its leaves turning brown and brittle. The disciples were stunned by the suddenness and authority of Jesus' words, struggling to comprehend the power he wielded. Jesus used the moment to teach them a profound lesson about faith and prayer, reminding them that unwavering trust in God could move mountains and that even the smallest measure of faith, as tiny as a mustard seed, could accomplish the seemingly impossible. The incident left a profound impression on those who witnessed it, leading them to a deeper understanding of the true nature of faith and the power of prayer. They began to realize that Jesus' authority extended far beyond healing and miracles, encompassing the natural world and the spiritual lives of people, calling for a faith that bore tangible fruit. The miracles of Jesus reveal far more than mere displays of supernatural power. They unveil the very heart of God, a heart overflowing with compassion, love, and mercy. From the humble act of turning water into wine at a wedding feast to the awe-inspiring resurrection of Lazarus from the tomb, each act of power carried a profound message of hope, authority, and the boundless love of God. Through his touch, his words, and his very presence, Jesus restored the sick, opened blind eyes, fed the hungry, calmed raging storms, and brought life to those living in the shadows of despair. Every miracle told a story, a glimpse into the lives of those who were suffering. A widow's inconsolable loss, a child's debilitating illness, a man's lifelong blindness, the desperate cries of parents fearing for their children's lives. Each act of healing and provision pointed to a greater truth, that God's kingdom is characterized by mercy, unwavering faith, and an abundance of life. Even ordinary moments became extraordinary signs, revealing the divine authority of Christ through simple acts of obedience, compassion, and selfless service. Beyond physical healing, Jesus' miracles challenged cultural barriers, shattered religious expectations, and softened hardened hearts. His acts of healing on the Sabbath, his willingness to reach across social and ethnic boundaries, and his unwavering commitment to freeing those bound by spiritual oppression invited all who witnessed them to reconsider their preconceived notions about God, power, and grace. These miracles were never intended to end in mere amazement. They were, and continue to be, invitations to trust, to believe, and to follow Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the Savior of the world. And yet, even with all that has been recorded in the Gospels, we are reminded that what we read is only a small glimpse into the vastness of his works. As John concludes, there are also many other things which Jesus did, the which, if they should be written every one, I suppose that even the world itself could not contain the books that should be written. Amen. These miracles call us to more than mere admiration. They call us to faith, a faith that transforms our lives and empowers us to live in the light of his love. To believe is not simply to witness what Jesus can do, but to trust in who he is, the Lord of all creation, the source of all life, the one who offers us forgiveness, healing, and eternal life. The invitation remains open to all. Come, see, believe, and follow.